Remove that medal now!
Wanna go?
You have no idea what you're doing! Just pretending to be powerful. But today, everyone will discover you're nothing more than a desperate fraud. This case will destroy your reputation. Enjoy your victory, and tomorrow. You made one mistake today.
You underestimated me, and now everyone is about to hear what you secretly planned.
His gavel slamming down with a sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet room. That medal does not belong in this courtroom. It is a distraction. The entire courtroom fell silent. The air pressure seemed to drop to zero. I looked at the man sitting in the gallery. My sister-in-law. She wasn't looking at me with sympathy. She was looking at me with pure, unadulterated glee. She had her legs crossed, a smirk playing on her lips, waiting for me to break. And waiting for the moment I realized I had walked into a lion's den. I didn't say a word. I didn't blink. I simply reached up, hooked my fingers under the ribbon of the Navy Cross, the second highest award for valor in the United States Navy, and lifted it from my chest. I dropped it onto the defense table with a heavy thud. That was their first mistake, I whispered, loud enough for the bailiff to hear. I was a ghost in my own life. I had moved back home to help my older brother, the man who raised me after our parents died, get his life back on track. He had a drinking problem, a gambling problem, and a wife who hated my guts. I was 26, living in a guest bedroom, working part-time at a hardware store to pay for his rent. I was invisible. I was the good little sister-in-law who brought dinner over and kept her mouth shut. But nobody knew that the good little sister-in-law had spent 4 years in the Middle East. Nobody knew that I had walked through fire to save a squad mate who couldn't walk. Nobody knew that the Navy Cross pinned to my chest was awarded posthumously to a man I was forced to leave behind to save my own life. To my brother and his wife, I was just a burden, a parasite living off their success. "You're just jealous, aren't you?" my sister-in-law had said to me at Christmas. She was wearing a diamond necklace that cost more than my first car. "You want a rich husband. You want a life like mine. But you're just a nobody with a dead husband and a military fetish." I had just smiled and poured her another glass of wine. But the truth was, I wasn't a nobody. I was the owner of the real estate development firm that owned the building they lived in. I was the silent partner. And I was about to use that silence to tear their world apart. The case before the judge today wasn't about traffic tickets. It was about a construction accident at my brother's company. A site where my sister-in-law was the safety inspector. The company was broke. My brother was broke. They needed a win, and they were trying to pin the blame for a fatal structural collapse on a subcontractor. They had hired the most aggressive defense attorney in the state. The lawyer stood up, a slimy man named Miller, and began to dismantle me. Not as a witness, but as a person. "You see, Your Honor, the plaintiff is a woman of leisure," Miller sneered, his eyes locking onto my face. "She doesn't understand the rigors of construction. She lives in a fantasy world where rules are suggestions. She has no business being here." He turned to the gallery. "Look at her. She looks like she's ready to faint." My sister-in-law laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. The judge looked at me, his expression bored. "Is that true, Miss Smith? Do you have any experience in construction safety?" "I have experience in saving lives," I said calmly. Miller laughed. "And I have experience in winning cases. And I'm going to win this one, Your Honor, because the plaintiff is a fraud." He didn't know it, but he had just declared war on the U.S. Navy. Miller spent the next hour trying to humiliate me. He grilled me on my employment history, attacking my time in the service. He insinuated that my PTSD was a lie, that my medals were for show. "You're just a woman playing soldier," Miller spat, slamming his hand on the podium. "Put her in a uniform and she thinks she's Rambo. But take away the uniform and she's nothing." The judge looked annoyed. "Counsel, save the theatrics." Miller ignored him. "Your Honor, this case is a farce. My client deserves a dismissal. And I demand the plaintiff be sanctioned for wasting the court's time with her military theatrics." He pointed a finger at me. "Take off that medal. It's offensive to the dignity of this court. It's a distraction. It's disrespectful." The courtroom turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Even the bailiff looked uncomfortable. My sister-in-law in the gallery was practically vibrating with excitement. She thought she had broken me. She thought she had humiliated me into submission. But the more Miller yelled, the colder I became. I didn't get angry. Anger is a waste of energy. I just watched him. I analyzed him. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the tremor in his hand. He was terrified. "You are out of order," the judge shouted, his face turning red. "Mr. Miller, I will not tolerate this behavior. You are attacking the witness, not the case." Miller stumbled back, realizing he had gone too far. He looked at me with pure malice.
Fine.
But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. He picked up a file from his table and slammed it onto the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. "I'm done with this circus," Miller said, grabbing his briefcase. "I'm withdrawing from the case. I quit." The room went still. The judge looked furious. "You cannot withdraw. The trial is in its third day." Miller looked at the gallery, locking eyes with my sister-in-law. He gave a small, helpless shrug. "Your Honor, I cannot represent a client who is going to lose. And I certainly won't work for a woman who wears a medal to court. It's a conflict of interest. I'm done." He turned to leave. "That was their first mistake," I said softly. The judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Miller. You are not leaving this courtroom until I finish this trial. You are in contempt of court." Miller sneered. "I'm not staying here to listen to this fraud." Version 1.0 Start HTML 00000000156 and HTML 000013152 Start fragment 000000469 and fragment 00001311512. He started to walk out. "Stop." The command came for me. I hadn't raised my voice. It was a flat, terrifying sound. Miller froze. He turned slowly, his face twisted in confusion. "What?" I stood up.
Slowly.
Deliberately. I walked to the center of the aisle. The entire courtroom watched me like I was a bomb about to go off. I reached into my pocket. Miller flinched. He thought I was pulling a weapon. He took a step back, his eyes wide. I pulled out my phone. I wasn't pulling a gun. I was pulling the evidence. I pressed play. The courtroom filled with the sound of a recording. It was a voice memo I had made 3 months ago. It was a conversation between my brother and my sister-in-law, recorded on my phone while I was in the other room. The audio was grainy, but the words were crystal clear. "I don't care if the building collapses," my brother's voice said. "If the subcontractor sues, we blame him. But we need to make sure the structural report is falsified. We need Miller to win. We need to make sure the insurance pays out." "Did you record that?" My sister-in-law's voice was sharp, panicked. "Did you record me?" "I didn't record you," I said, walking up to the defense table. "I recorded you too." Miller's face went pale. He looked at the judge, then at me, then back at the floor. You're the owner?" Miller stammered. "You're the silent partner?" "I am the owner," I said. "And I own this company. And I own the building. And I own the subcontractor you were just trying to frame." I pulled a document from my other pocket. It was a certified copy of the lawsuit. A countersuit. "Mr. Miller," I said, my voice steady. "You just withdrew from a case where you were being paid by the hour. And now you're going to be representing the defendants in a fraud case where the damages are in the millions." Miller looked at the papers in my hand. He realized he had just walked into a trap that would bury him in federal prison. "You can't do this," Miller whispered. "This is illegal." "Is it?" I smiled. "Or is it just good business?" The judge's jaw dropped. He looked at the recording, then at Miller, then at me. He quickly picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Judge, this is the U.S. Attorney's Office," the judge said into the phone. Yes. I have a situation here. I need a federal magistrate to come to my courtroom immediately. There is a construction fraud investigation that needs to begin." Miller's knees buckled. He slid down to the floor, his briefcase landing on top of him. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Miller was arrested on the spot. He was charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and witness tampering. My brother tried to run. He tried to jump out the back exit of the courthouse. But he didn't make it far. I had already called the marshals. I had already called the press. As my brother was being hauled away in handcuffs, screaming that he was innocent, my sister-in-law stood in the gallery. She looked at me. She looked at the Navy Cross on the floor. She didn't cry. She just looked broken. She realized that her husband wasn't the man she thought he was. She realized that her safety inspector credentials were fake. She realized that the diamond necklace she was wearing, that was the last piece of jewelry she was ever going to wear. The company was seized. The assets were frozen. The lawsuits were endless. 3 months later, I was sitting in my office. It was the same office my brother had used to run his scam. Now, it was a legitimate business. The Navy Cross was back on my chest. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I had won. I had taken down a corrupt lawyer, a fraudulent husband, and a lying wife. But the best part wasn't the money. The best part wasn't the prison sentences. It was the silence. My sister-in-law had lost everything. She was working at a diner, scrubbing dishes, trying to pay off the debts she and her husband had accrued. She couldn't even look me in the eye when we passed each other at the grocery store. I had my peace. I had my life. And I had my brother's respect. Not that it mattered anymore. He was in a cell, and I was free. I looked down at the medal. It was heavy. It was a reminder of what I had done. But it was also a reminder of who I was. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a burden. I was a survivor. And I had made sure that the people who thought they could use me would never forget my name. My brother was released on parole last month. He came to see me. He was a broken man. He apologized. He begged for forgiveness. I told him I forgave him. But I told him he would never work for me again. I told him he had to earn his way back up, $1 at a time. He nodded. He was walking away when he stopped. "Hey," he said. "Yeah?" I asked. "I'm sorry I called you a nobody." I smiled. "You know, nobody is a pretty powerful title." He walked out the door. I sat back in my chair, picked up my pen, and signed the next file. The world kept turning, and I was still standing. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more revenge stories every week.